Brian Twining, NASCAR season is here. Super Bowl is in the rear view window. It is time to talk Daytona 500. Obviously, we've done a couple of shows between the end of 2023 and the start of Daytona 500. We obviously had the clash week prior to the Super Bowl. So NASCAR is starting to find its footing. But we are back to do our thing. We will be talking outrights. We'll be talking head-to-heads, placings, and doing Underdog Pickem all before we get out of here.
Ross Chastain used the wall all the way around this racetrack.
Logano has been the class of the field.
Check out the big brain on Brad.
Yeah, I need to change my underwear.
Brian Twining, it is time, right about that time. We are here. We are back. NASCAR Week 1, the official points race, the Daytona 500, the Super Bowl of NASCAR, as they say. It's all happening, and we're here to break it all down. So if you've missed some of our preseason content, we have adjusted our schedule a little bit. We will be recording on Tuesdays and getting it to you Wednesday morning to break down the betting lines, to get an early edge on any lines that we like. Then we will regroup on Saturdays to talk DraftKings and get all the pricing. And after post qualifying, get that posted as soon as possible. If it's a early Saturday and I can get it out Saturday afternoon, I definitely will. Sunday morning for sure, early Sunday. And then I'm working on the newsletter. It's so close to being done, but the plan is to have the green, white checkered in your inbox every Sunday morning with final bets, with pickems, with DraftKings thoughts. So if you don't have time one week to check out the pod, if you want our final betting card, if you want some sneaky DraftKings picks, maybe we'll get some guests to submit a pick or a thought on DraftKings.
That'd be fun.
In your inbox. It's completely free. It's completely awesome. So that will be down in the comments. I know I said that last time, but I will actually have it this time. It's been a little bit of a chore to get to where I'm ready to have it actually out, but we will have it out. We will have it ready for Sunday morning for Daytona, and I couldn't be more excited. Brian Twining, you have the 12 hat on, our defending NASCAR Cup champion.
Right.
But one of the, if not the betting favorite this week.
Yeah.
How the hell are you? Are you ready for another fun NASCAR season? This is season 4 for us.
4. Yeah.
That's crazy.
It is wild. And yeah, I have never looked forward to the end of a football season more than I had this past one. Like, the Super Bowl was fantastic. I mean, I had a blast. I was in Vegas for it. I was actually at the Westgate Superbook for the game, working and of course making bets. I made a pretty good profit by not picking a side to win. I was just playing with totals and player props. But my favorite part of the weekend was on Saturday and Sunday when I got there early. And of course, I waited in the line to place a wager. And I was the only schmuck sitting there betting NASCAR win totals at the window.
Or
and
you're the NASCAR genius and you're the ones actually lining up to bet the good stuff.
Yeah, I wish I would have taken a picture or recorded the reaction of the teller when I gave him the number, and he kind of looked up at me and gave me this glance like,
it's like betting baseball in the middle of March Madness. It's like, what? This isn't what we do here, sir. You can come back anytime and do this.
The guy was so confused, but I was like, yep, nope, that's what I want. And so it goes to show you, I've been looking forward to the beginning of this season, probably since the end of last year. After watching Ryan Blaney be crowned a champion, I mean, he won us some money there. That was really nice.
Yep.
I've been looking forward to 2024. I think there's a lot of good opportunities out there still for season-long bets, futures. We'll see how heavily invested or not at all we get in this weekend's Daytona 500. I mean, we're really seeding the advice of one Chris Wormy here. At least I am, like, trying to be very cautious at these super speedway races to control the bankroll a little bit.
Yeah, we definitely can't Chris Wormy it and just like not bet it because race of the year, it's a lot of fun. But it definitely is a lottery ticket 500. Like, understand what you're betting, understand that there's going to be carnage, understand that, exposing yourself heavily, betting a lot of favorites, that kind of stuff may be a recipe for disaster.
I think
this is a great DraftKings weekend. not so
Yes.
much a betting card weekend.
Yeah, and I think too, like if you sit back and if you are somebody who's a little bit more experienced of a bettor, and you kind of plan out your full NASCAR season into individual weeks or individual races, and so you have like 1/36th your bankroll for the season designated for a specific race. I think it's probably of your best interest to maybe take all 4 of these super speedway races and have that count for 1/36th of your entire bankroll. So I mean, you're looking at a quarter of a weekend for each of these races, because these literally are absolute crapshoots. I mean, I've said this multiple times. It's like throwing darts blindfolded when you're trying to pick a winner at the Daytona 500.
Yeah.
You never know what's going to stick, who's going to win, or what's going to happen.
Yeah, and like NASCAR, it's its own animal, right? Wheels fall off, wedge wrenches get stuck, things happen, things out of the driver's control,
Yep.
a rookie making a dumb mistake in front of you, and that's just normal races. Now we're going to amplify that up to 11 and let the carnage ensue. So, yeah, smaller units, get your beak wet, look for some longer shots that maybe you can hit. This is a fun week to take some deep dives on some top 5s, some top 3s, some even top 10s. If the price is right, look for manufacturer props, all that good stuff. That being said, Brian, let's look at the front runners and talk about who, if anyone. Obviously, there's going to be weeks where we're going to be, let's dive into the top of the board. Let's hit some of those guys. There's value there still, even at 6 or 7 to 1, depending on who we're talking about. Kyle Larson, William Byron. That being said, this is not that week. However, Denny Hamlin is your favorite. We talked a little bit about this in the season preview, and how he's very cautious and patient in super speedway races. He is a guy that's like, I'm happy to drop to 28th and let the carnage happen in front of me, drive around it, and give myself all 4 wheels on the track at the end to try and win it. Because that's what you need to do. It's survive an advanced type race. You don't want to be Ross Chastain and driving every lap like it's the last lap, and kind of forcing your way unnecessarily. So Hamlin, inside 12 to 1, inside 10 to 1 most places, seems pricey, and I don't know that I would get there. I don't fault anyone who does. It's just at this track, it's really hard. Then we're talking Brian Blaney, Brad Keselowski, Joey Logano, Kyle Busch, and then and then probably include the William Byron, Kyle Larson, Chris Buescher, Chase Elliott, Kyle Busch. So I guess of the favorites, obviously, I think I know you well enough to know that you're probably not diving in here. That being said, do you have any thoughts if you were potentially looking to bet a favorite or two? Is there anyone who kind of stands apart from this pack, or is it really just like close your eyes, cross it off, and move on?
Well, I do think it's really interesting to continue to see Brad Keselowski up at the top here, and I think it's definitely warranted for how well RFK ran at super speedways last year. I mean, it was Chris Buescher who took the checkered. I believe it was the Coke 400 late in the summer, and it was Brad Keselowski pushing him to the victory in that race. So, I mean, I definitely see a world. Also, going back to our previous show when we talked about season win totals and all that type of stuff, Brad Keselowski, like, win total this year is definitely something I'm considering still hitting. I already have it at a half over at our favorite offshore, but sitting at 1.5 at some places, I don't hate that. And then, Kyle Busch, he's been incredible at Daytona. He hasn't necessarily had the finishing results or top 5s, but I mean, you go back just 2 years ago, or actually it was last year when he was running with Austin Dillon up at the front, and then they wrecked. Like, it just goes to show you can never predict the end of this race. You could be the leader for 60-70% here, and then as we're coming to the finish, there's going to be something that happens that causes you to not win, which is probably why I'm not touching any of these numbers at 10, 12, even the 16 that you can get Busch at BetRivers. It's just hard to get in on something that's so unpredictable. Even if you think that guy has a good chance, again, say we're coming to the edge of stage 1 and you have, Ross Chastaining it, trying to get stage points, and he wrecks the field.
So a couple things. For season win totals, please make sure you double and triple check what you're betting because some books are just the 26, standard races, and some of
Yep.
them include the playoff races. So make sure you understand what you're betting. So you're actually betting a good number. Kyle Busch is very interesting. Obviously, his second full year with RCR. I'm curious to see if things get a little bit better there, a little more consistent. They obviously had issues where he looked great at points and then he looked awful at points. But I did see, as I was reviewing kind of previous histories and getting kind of my card together for this week, Kyle Busch just like kept continuing to show up super speedways, like being near the front, having good results, all that good stuff. It might be a good week to bet stage props because if you bet a stage 1 winner, a stage 2 winner, that kind of thing, you might have an opportunity where you can avoid some of the early carnage, get a stage 1 victory, get a stage 2, maybe top 3, that kind of stuff. And I know sports books don't traditionally give us a big menu for NASCAR, but if there is a week where they're going to unload the bank and give us a variety of options, this is definitely it. So that's why it makes it hard because it's like we know
Yep.
we're not supposed to be betting and going crazy because so much nonsense can happen, but
Yeah.
also we get so many opportunities and so many different ways to bet it that it's like a little bit of a push pull, little angel devil on your shoulder saying, "Come on, you can bet this. You want to."
Yeah,
Um,
they definitely unload in terms of the market offerings for the
yeah,
Daytona 500.
yeah. So I like I said, I think Hamlin's fine. I think Ryan Blaney's fine, even at their prices. I probably won't be betting either, but I do understand people who get there. It makes a lot of sense, as you mentioned with Brad Keselowski. RFK was incredible, and that's why I'm tempted to bet Busher. I think I've seen a 16 in market, which is interesting. Even after betting him under 1.5 wins for the season. So
Mhm.
obviously getting a win here would kind of set me behind the 8 ball, but then it also kind of mitigates that bet because obviously I'm able to recoup some of that money. So it's an interesting thought there. I'm sure when we turn, if you tune into the NASCAR betting preview, Derek will be singing Kyle Larson's praises and talking about his general unluckiness. No, I don't know how I feel about it, but he's definitely a good driver. Obviously, maybe the best in NASCAR. Um, but he does have, I don't know. It just seems like every time he gets to super speedway, things don't go well. Let's talk about the next range because I think there may be a bet or two in here. So we have Bubba at 20. We have Christopher Bell at 22. Eric Jones at 28. Martin Truex at 25. Chastain at 28. Cindric at 28. We'll throw Reddick, pretty much anyone inside 30. Reddick, Ty Gibbs, Alex Bowman, Ricky Stenhouse. Obviously,
Nope.
there's so many opportunities that they're really going to squish us into ranges. And then we'll stop at Austin Dillon because he's kind of the last guy that has odds inside, at 30 to 1 or shorter. So I guess from this range, is there a name or two that jump out to you as potential bets?
Yeah, I think this is the range where you really start to consider if you are going to bet the Daytona 500. This is where you begin to start to build your outright card from. I mean, when you look at the last 3 winners of this race, Michael McDowell, Austin Cindric, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., they all opened at 30 to 1 or longer coming into the weekends. And, it doesn't matter what they've done in the past or that they were actually decent at super speedways, but they were just there at the end and lucked out into the win. I mean, if it wasn't for that last caution last year, Ricky Stenhouse probably doesn't win that race, and maybe it's actually Joey Logano that gets the W. McDowell, he was kind of an unsung guy here in 2021. A lot of people didn't expect that for him to win. We liked him the top 10. We didn't really even anticipate him getting the victory. And then Austin Cindric stole the win from Ryan Blaney and Bubba Wallace in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm looking at guys like Ty Gibbs, 30 to 1. If you could still get that, the car was absolutely ridiculous at the Clash. I know it's not anywhere near as comparable as the package we're going to be bringing this week at Daytona, but I do think it's important to remember that Toyota now has 2 more cars added to its garage. So you're going to have more push power.
Yep.
And the changes that they made to this body style, one of the things that I asked Christopher Bell about before the Clash actually ran was about the body style and them flattening the nose of the car. And they said one of the reasons why they wanted to do that was to allow them to actually push better at super speedway and drafting track. So I'm excited to see how that actually works out, but just seeing the speed that Gibbs brought out, and if you could still get 30-1, considering this is the range where we've seen winners come from the last 3 years, I think that's an okay dart throw. And then, you have the typical suspects, Bubba Wallace at 20, 22. I don't hate that. He's always really good. He's always competitive. And then Eric Jones is actually somebody I do have on my card over at our favorite offshore at 30-1. Very small play. Like we're talking pittance. So, again, Toyota Garage. I do think we see them be a little bit stronger in terms of pushing.
I like where your head's at. I like the insight on the car, and I'm curious. It's always a little bit interesting, especially early, to try and figure out how the new car. The NASCAR continues to make changes to the car, and each team kind of does something a little bit different. And now they're, each of the past couple of years, obviously we've got the brand new car last year, so it's like, we're playing. How did they do on this track? But also their very new vehicle. It's going to drive very different. Trying to cobble all that together. So more information we can get. I think the first couple of weeks will be good. So, step into the water slowly. I like the Ty Gibbs thought. I think he was somebody, especially in the middle of the season, where you kind of like started to falter. You're like, oh, here comes the rookie wall. He's not going to, finish as strong as we kind of seen early. And he was able to push through and had a really good finish and really good close and was strong down the stretch. So that was good to see. And I don't hate that. A couple names for me in this range. Christopher Bell, you talked about him. 22 is sort of interesting. He's a guy that I don't know that he's ever really like pushed for the win, but he's always been right kind of in that next level. And obviously he's a guy that, made the Final Four the last 2 years. I think could be smart enough to put himself in position, but have the guts to kind of push it when he needs to and kind of make that happen. It's going to be pretty gross, but the first name going on my outright card, Brian, Alex Bowman. Bowman the Showman.
I love this.
I know last year was the year from hell for Bowman. I know, what we saw was not, wasn't the season he wanted. Obviously missed time with injury. But this is a guy who traditionally does really well. And then, our guy iFantasy Race, it's the first of many. We'll be referencing all of his tweets and information because he locks and loads us all year long. So at iFantasy Race on Twitter, if you're not following him already, highly recommend taking a look at that. But his qualifying results at the Daytona 500, 2018 first, 2019 second, 2020 second, 2021 first, 2022 second, 2023 first. So he's a guy that knows how to put his car on the front row. And obviously a lot's going to happen throughout the race. But if there's a place you don't want to be during the majority of the race, it's in the middle of the field where nonsense can happen. You either want to be way in the back to go drive around it if you need to, all of Denny Hamlin, or you want to be like Bowman, get to the front and kind of stay there. Like let that all the carnage happen behind you. And keep finding ways to stay up there, give yourself a shot and have a chance. I last year was the year from hell. Maybe that is who Alex Bowman is in this new car, and maybe eventually he finds his way out of HMS and into somewhere else. But I think he has enough talent. I think obviously he's in a very good car. I think there's a lot of reason for optimism. And if, we're talking about Kyle Larson at 15, 16, 17, or Alex Bowman at 30, between the two HMS drivers, I'd much rather have Alex Bowman.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you started talking about Bowman, and I was actually hoping that you hit on him because I was going to give him like an honorable mention, mainly because of his qualifying efforts here and just kind of anticipating the return of HMS. I mean, last year was the first time we've seen that garage not put three guys in position to compete for a championship. And, it just so happened that because two of them dealt with injuries or just had some like extenuating circumstances that ruined their seasons. And it just kind of caused them to take a back seat and allow Hendrick to push all of their stuff towards the 5 and the 24. I think we see them kind of return to, the top team in the sport. Alex Bowman's win total right now is still at 0.5. I think that's also an interesting lean for him. I mean, I believe he's had a win or at least one win in like 4 of the last 5 years. So, I think that's a interesting spot to get in on him. And when you're looking at darts, 30-1 on a guy who's probably going to qualify near the front is not a bad number to get on.
And I will say one of the things you'll notice if you look at odds post qualifying is they're probably not going to change a ton, just because so much happens, and you can win the race from starting 30th, or you can get last place starting first. Like, there's a wide range, but he has the skills to drive on this track. He knows how to keep his car near the front, and if he can keep himself clean, he's going to have a legit shot at the end. And 30-1 is a price that I could get to. I tried to talk myself into Austin Cindric under a much similar circumstances. A guy who's done well here, obviously has a win. It's just the way last year fell apart. Like, I need to see it from him that he's even competitive before I can look at betting outrights. When Tyler Reddick is behind him, Ty Gibbs, as you mentioned, Alex Bowman, I could go up and get.
I think even Chastain is somebody to consider. I mean, he's got to win at Talladega, so it's not like he can't win at a super speedway.
And Martin Truex, honestly, like, we saw a big step forward from him at super speedways last year. And he traditionally wasn't very good there, but obviously a really, really good driver, tons of experience, and started showing that he could be competitive on super speedways. So I'm really interested to see kind of how that plays out. I'm not betting Ricky Stenhouse or Austin Dillon. Don't fault anyone who goes there. Those guys have traditionally popped on super speedways. They just scare me. The name I want to talk about is a guy who also did well on super speedways, and what was interesting is Chase Briscoe. But SHR had the awful cars last year. They just continually brought garbage to the track. There'd be a spot here or a spot there where they'd figure it out, usually a shorter, flatter track, and they'd be competitive. Can we trust SHR to at least bring something decent to the track this year and give their drivers a chance? Obviously, they have a huge overhaul of that garage. Almirola's gone, Harvick's gone, in steps Gragson, in steps Josh Berry. But Briscoe is somebody that, for whatever reason, I find myself gravitated towards, and I think he's somebody where he's not an elite driver necessarily everywhere, tends to show up at short flat tracks and tends to show up at super speedways. And if you can get 35, I've seen some like high 20s on him. I don't know if I love that as much, but at 35, I think it's an interesting lottery ticket.
Yeah, I mean, a lot was said about his disappointing 2023, and he definitely cost me some coin last year. But he did look a little. There were signs of him returning to the 2022 form last year. I mean, SHR as a whole was just an absolute dumpster fire last season, so it's really hard to gauge like how good the cars were, what we should expect for them coming into this season. I will say, now that he's kind of at the forefront of that team and he's now like the leader of SHR, there's going to be a lot higher expectations from this car coming into 2024. I'm in a wait and see mode from this team. I mean, obviously at Daytona, anybody can hit the lottery literally at this track. So I don't hate the 35-1 number, because he's actually been pretty competitive at super speedways. But for me, it's more so like I want to see what they bring to the table in Las Vegas to see if they're able to actually have a competitive car on a 1.5, which is really the barometer that we should be measuring teams by.
Because he is somebody that, wouldn't think, like in 2022, was competitive at mile and a halves, and could be somebody that, you're definitely not going to be the favorite. But if you told me he made the Final Four and he has to race for a win in Phoenix, like, he's on the shorter list of guys that I think, okay, I could see a path. I think it makes sense. Obviously, going up against a Larson or a Byron or a Blaney, it's going to be an uphill climb no matter what. But like, there's a lot of guys that you can just easily scratch off. And if we think he can be competitive at mile and a halves, he's somebody from a futures market makes a lot of sense. But, it's kind of an interesting thing, because you want to see him do well, but you also don't want to lose out on the best of the number, because if he goes out and wins Phoenix or wins Vegas, and all of a sudden, so it's basically locked himself into the playoffs, his number is going to crater, and obviously not. It'll still be longer because he is still Chase Briscoe at the end of the day, but I think there'll be a less of a sexy opportunity there. Let's go to the longer shots as we go basically beyond 40 to 1. So we have Ryan Preece, Michael McDowell, Josh Berry, Daniel Suarez, basically anybody we can get to inside 100 to 1. And honestly, I don't think we're even going to get there unless you want to talk about Kaz Gralla, Alfredo, or our mascot here, Mr. BJ McLeod. But I guess of kind of the longer shot guys, is there a name or two that you're like, if you want to throw a couple dollars and see if it hits, if you want to throw $5 on it and see if it hits, I've done less with more. So, does anyone jump out to you as a potential value down in this range?
So I think two names way down the list are pretty intriguing, and that's going to be Riley Herbst driving the 15 and Rick Ware, and then David Reagan, who's taking in a third RFK car this weekend.
Yeah.
He's actually been pretty good at super speedways.
And he's actually not in a Rick Ware car. He's in a RFK car, which
exactly,
especially with their success as, all of last year, if you're telling me I have to bet one of these guys way down here, he's definitely more interesting than a lot of the other names.
Yeah. Now for Reagan's case, he's going to have to qualify into the race, because I don't believe he's one of the guaranteed spots. So I mean, there you have to check with your book to make sure that this line isn't actionable if he doesn't qualify for the actual race, because that would, obviously it's not going to be a very big wager, but still, you don't want this going off regardless of whether or not he's actually racing. So keep that in mind. Reagan and Herbst for me. I mean, Riley Herbst was right there at the end last year in the one super speedway race he was in, and I mean, he pushed Ryan Blaney to the win, I believe, at Talladega in the playoffs. That was kind of the race that he won. He had a chance to win that. So, I think Herbst is interesting. And, this is the race for ultimate lottery tickets, 80 to 1 or 85 to 1. You bet a fucking dollar on that, and you're winning $85, and you're only down less than what a soda costs at a convenience store. So, I don't really hate doing that.
Yeah, I mean, you could triple your bet and still be less than what a soda costs.
That is very true.
The other name from this range that I'm actually into is AJ Allmendinger, and obviously ran in Daytona for the first time since 2018 last year. Ended up getting.
I just don't know what to make of them as a cup team anymore.
Oh no, I agree. They're a mess, but he's running his 16 Colleague car, so it's a comfortable car. It's not like a Rick Ware car. It's not a jabroni car. It should be at least decent. Obviously, we'll see what he can actually do. But if you can get an 80, I don't hate it. I think, some of the names Brian mentioned, Herbst, Reagan, and then Allmendinger. These guys are really fun to bet for top threes, top fives, because you can get I'll mention my dinger bet here in a little bit, but you can get double digit 15, 20, 25 to 1 on a top three. You can get 10 to 1 on a top five. And if they're near the front and they can push a Ryan Blaney to a win, you still get your top three. Do I see any of them winning? Probably not. But do I think they can be competitive and be in the conversation at the end? I think so. He with Colleague got, obviously, like I said, got a sixth in 2023. Obviously didn't do as well in the August race, but has had some top tens and in the past, and has actually been somewhat competitive. So I think he's interesting. Obviously there is some risk there given his not really running cup full time and doing the Xfinity thing, and he's traditionally a road course guy, not a mile and a half or any of that kind of stuff. But he is a good driver. He can pop here, and I think at his price he is a fine wager.
Yeah, I don't hate it, especially if you get at the 80 to 1 number or longer. I mean, you're talking very minimal bet for a decent payout.
Exactly. All right. So as I mentioned, these guys make a lot more sense. So for top 3, if you won a lottery ticket, that's not necessarily they have to win. AJ Allmendinger is 20-1 to top 3, and I'm adding that to my card over at Caesars. You can find that number on our favorite offshore as well. You can, put $10 on it and win 200. That's pretty nice. And at the end of the day, if you lose $10, you lose $10. But I
Folks,
think
Kyle is getting wild already.
well, and I'm keeping myself in check. I've only added 2 bets so far. I'm not going to add 27 bets like we did last year and then have a massive hole to dig ourselves out of.
True.
I'm putting half a unit on 20-1. I'm very happy with where that will land me, and I'm gonna just ride the wave. As Brian mentioned, let's see, there was so Riley Herbst, you can get him at 20-22. David Reagan 20-1 for a top 3. Both of those
I just don't know. Like, to me, it's either boom or bust with those guys. Like, they're not. If they're up there at the end, do you think that a guy like Herbst or Reagan, who is like especially Reagan, for instance, he's only entering this race, like he's not running full time. Why wouldn't he just push the issue and go for the win?
Because I
Which
could
would
see
probably
him
result in a wreck.
being there at the end, near the front, and then a cup driver pushing him just enough, and he ends up finishing the race going backwards and getting second or fourth. And then you're cashing your top 5s, your top 3s. Like I'm
Well,
not
I mean,
going.
you just explained the Riley Herbst experience.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like I mean, like Austin Dillon 10-1, Chase Briscoe 11-1. Like these guys are fine for a top 3. I'm probably not getting up into single digits. I think I'd rather drop down to look at like top 5s. Let's see here.
Okay, just for reference, real quick. So David Reagan, ironically enough, he drove the Rick Ware car to 2 top 10s in 2022. Mm-hmm. So I mean, a top 5 in an RFK, the 3rd RFK car, like that's going to be rough, but something like that I could definitely be interested in for the right
and you
price.
can get 9-1 on him to do that. And I would much rather take a 9-1 shot on him potentially bettering that and getting a top 5, especially because carnage can happen. He all of a sudden, it looked like he was going to be 7th and he ends up 4th, right? So you hit that bet. Where if you're betting him to top 10, it's probably more like 2 or 3-1. And that's fine if you just want a little more safety. But like if I'm betting lottery tickets, I want a lottery ticket prize. So like Reagan is
these top 10 numbers are gross.
Yeah, 2.5, 3-1. Like I'd much rather push it into top 5, get 3 times the price, and hope that I can get there.
Yeah.
And
again though, you have to make sure at the book that you're betting this at does not deem it actionable if he does not qualify.
Yep, and a lot of the books will say has to start for bet to be valid, and that's make sure your book says that. And if you have questions, reach out to customer service just to verify, because you don't want to get caught with your pants down and lose a bet that the guy didn't even have a chance to run. So
exactly.
Yeah. Any top 10, top 5 bets you want to look at? Anybody's number? Like obviously, like you mentioned, the numbers are ridiculously gross. They can they're obviously pricing things aggressively. Some of the higher end guys you're getting like positive numbers, which is good on some, but still at this track, at the way this race is ran, a Ross Chastain at 3-1 to top 5 is kind of makes my stomach turn.
Yeah. I do think I mean, just for the sake of the show, I am going to add a Riley Herbst top 10.
Okay.
I think it's 325 over at BetRivers right now. Let me check it. Yeah, 3.25 at BetRivers. I mean, obviously, this is not something I think you should go out there and even bet $100 on, because I mean, this is like,
take whatever
you're
your normal unit is and at
splitting
least
hairs.
bet a quarter of it or bet half of it if that's what obviously figure out what your risk reward is. But like we've been saying the whole time, like, patience. You don't have to bet everything this week. You want to make sure you have money, so by the time we get to Phoenix and Vegas and all of the fun tracks and Kansas and the ones where we can take advantage of good numbers, you have a bankroll to work with. So have fun, don't go crazy.
Yeah,
And
and I do think too, especially for people that aren't like doing this as a profession, or aren't using this as a like a subsequent revenue stream, and you're just a recreational bettor, like, how do you watch the Daytona 500 and not have something?
Throw a
Right.
couple lottery tickets out there, see what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna add Briscoe at plus 575 over at BetRivers to top 5. Like I talked about, I think he is interesting. I'm obviously not going to spray the board in terms of outrights. I might not add a second outright. I might add one. I'm debating adding one
Get
more.
ready to be heartbroken again.
Yeah, because I just I don't we've been talking, like, it's just it's fun to have a few lottery tickets. Maybe even if you normally bet a unit on each driver, you pick 4 drivers, you split that unit up into quarters and throw it on all of them and and then you have a few lottery tickets. And like I said, it's a much better race for like a DraftKings week than it is for a betting week.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So right now I have Bowman at 30 for half a unit. I have Dinger to top 3 at 20 for half a unit, and I have Chase Briscoe to top 5 at 575. And that's where I sit. And as I mentioned, Brian and I will tweet out. We'll share thoughts on Twitter, but we'll also subscribe to the newsletter, and you will get it in your inbox on Sunday morning to see the full betting card. And if you have questions, if you have guys you're thinking about, if you want our input, feel free to reach out. You can leave comments below the video. You can tweet us. We're here. You can follow us on Instagram and hop in our DMs there if you prefer that. We're everywhere. So feel free, reach out, give us some thoughts, give us some questions. We're always down to chat NASCAR, as well as make sure you're checking out the NASCAR betting preview show hosted by Derek Yoder at Derek Yoder _ should be definitely in your rotation, as well as the pre-race poll with Chris Wormy. I'm guessing he's not doing it this week, but should be back for the next race. And then also Stay Green with Todd Furman and Chris Wormy on the betting board, Bet the Board podcast feed.
There are a ton of other content creators that you should add to your NASCAR watching or viewing or listening schedule, just because the more data and more information you get, the more equipped you're going to be at the sportsbook, playing DFS, all that type of stuff. And, we all have our own unique personalities, and sometimes you'll notice we'll all be on the same guy in a particular week, and that's probably a good idea to fade, because
but the thing I like about it is we all kind of get there in different ways. Some of us are much more analytical, some of us are much more vibes based. We end up in the same spot. There's so many good content creators. Obviously, iFantasy Race, the Cody Zeeb and Rod Villa Gomez. Like, there's so many good people.
In
But
the race,
make sure,
Skybox guys.
Lane Coin. Make sure
podcast.
get as much into your rotation as possible. But every single week, NASCAR betting preview show and Stay Green and the Chris Wormy's pre-race poll are must watch for me. And then I kind of mix in as much of the other stuff as I can, because like Brian said, there's so many good content creators, but it's a small knit group that I think is really good, and everybody's really supportive of each other. So
we're
really,
all about
really
winning, not about being right.
Right. We want to win there. We want to win as a group. So let's do that. Brian, let's talk some head-to-heads before we give our favorite bet as we sit here on Tuesday, and then get out of here. So I pulled up DraftKings. We can also go over to Caesars and take a look. Kyle Busch minus 145, Martin Truex. Ty Gibbs versus Joey Logano. I know Logano is really strong. But we do like Gibbs at plus money. That's kind of interesting. Zane Smith versus Josh Berry. McDowell as minus 105 versus Stenhouse is kind of fun. Do you like any of the head-to-heads that DraftKings is currently offering?
Well, I mean, when you're looking at, again, Daytona, it doesn't matter how good somebody is. Somebody could wreck. I don't hate the Gibbs over Logano. I think, speaking on that real quick, I think we're in for a show this year as Ty Gibbs and Joey Logano have kind of established themselves as the big rivalry beginning the 2024 season, coming off of what happened, I believe it was Martinsville last year, with Logano absolutely obliterating Gibbs, and then Logano and Gibbs almost fighting on his hauler post the clash. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. You'll probably see this matchup quite often. I don't hate taking the plus money side here. I mean, it is Daytona, regardless of how good Logano is. Yep. And then, I think it is interesting that they have Ricky Stenhouse Jr. favored over Michael McDowell. Yes, Stenhouse won the Daytona 500 last year, but that was the first time in probably ever that Ricky Stenhouse Jr. actually came through in a race that he was amongst or he should do good. And it was the one year that nobody bet him after we all were donating money to the sports books for multiple seasons, expecting him to do well. So,
right. Yeah. He's definitely a, guy that we've all kind of seen, like, if everything goes together, he should be just fine and he could actually win the race. But usually something happens where with McDowell, I feel a lot safer about him being more reliable. Maybe he doesn't win, but maybe he's more consistent. And when you're looking for a head-to-head, I think that's the way to go. I'll hop over to Caesars and look at what they have. I believe it's in scheduled. So you can bet Hendrick versus Joe Gibbs in the race, Legacy versus Trackhouse. Trackhouse being a dog to Legacy is kind of interesting. I don't hate that.
I think it's the Toyota thing and the fact that they have Eric Jones, who's really strong at these tracks, and JHN too, for what it's worth. He's also pretty good at super speedways.
Front row as a slight favorite over Spire. I kind of like front row there. Herbst over Alfredo. Suarez and McDowell are right there. Hemrick and Zane Smith. So this is where I think it gets interesting. I'm debating if I want to fade Kyle Larson a bunch or just a little bit. So Larson versus Truex, as I mentioned, Truex is much better last year in super speedway races. You can get him at minus 105. I don't hate that. Briscoe and Priest. I know there's some love for Priest. I don't hate Briscoe there. Busher as a dog to Chase Elliott. I know it's Chase Elliott. I think he's going to bounce back in a big way. If you watched our NASCAR betting preview show, the season preview show, that I'm optimistic about him and kind of in general. So you can go check that out to see what I bet there. But I have one I want to throw up here. I believe it's should be on Caesars. I don't see it. I'll figure out where that was. Brian, of the ones that are up on Caesars, is there a head-to-head that's calling your name?
So one of the ones that I'm thinking about trying to hit on is going to be Justin Haley over Harrison Burton. The battle of the guys that can never finish a race at Daytona in the next-gen car. Haley jumping over from colleague over into Rick Ware. I talked about how I like the potential of Riley Herbst. Justin Haley has always been amongst one of the dark horses coming into, play on words there with him driving a dark horse Ford, coming into the 500. He's in a new car. He's in a team that is clearly committed to using him and, building their team around his young talents. And then you have Harrison Burton, who, you talk about bad luck. This guy just cannot get through a race without having something happen to him. So, I think if I'm going to pick a matchup just for something to root for, I think I'm going to go with that one. Haley over Harrison Burton at minus 110. I know the juice is trash. I don't recommend, betting a lot, if betting it at all, just because the book is definitely getting over on you by not having these at even money.
Yeah, no, that is a good call on your part. Can't seem to find it. I did find an Alex Bowman versus Kyle Larson, where Bowman was a sizable plus money underdog. And when you're betting a super speedway race where carnage can ensue, I don't hate taking advantage of. We did that last year a lot, where we'd see head to heads. One guy was like 3-1,
Yeah,
and
you
one
just
guy was
bet
like
it.
minus 300. And
Yeah.
we're like, that doesn't make sense. And we take it and we'd win. So I did take Bowman. Bowman over Josh Berry, I think, is interesting. Even at minus 130, I don't hate that. A lot of these pit guys that I kind of like both of them, and I don't really feel strongly one way or the other. So it's hard for me to really jump in when I kind of could see either guy winning pretty easily. RFK at plus money against Penske is interesting. I know they have Logano and I know they have Ryan Blaney, but RFK is really strong here. Busher and Keselowski both have a real legit shot, and you're getting plus money to do it. So
I will say, I forget what podcast it was on, but Ryan Blaney is on record of saying like he wants to win the Daytona 500 coming off of a championship because he feels like there would be nothing better than to solidify his spot as as a perennial championship favorite going forward if he can win coming off of a championship in the first race of the year.
Yeah, no, I think that would be pretty incredible. And then even if his season goes to shit after that, it'd be
Exactly. Real quick, if you scroll back down, I think this matchup right here is one that is really interesting. Noah Gragson versus Jimmy Johnson. Everybody is going to be on Johnson. To his top 10 odds are ridiculously inflated. He's going to be one of the most popular guys here. He's driving the third legacy car while Gragson is jumping into the 10, which saw Eric Almirola was an absolute, freaking speed demon at super speedways. That car is clearly good here. Noah Gragson, for what it's worth, is also really fast. It's just whether or not he can keep his car clean. I do think that the odds are leaned the correct way, but again, it's hard to lay 135, $1.35 on anybody in a matchup in a race that is as unpredictable as this one.
So your point on Gragson, I think, is a really good one. He's driving Almirola's number 10. He's driving the Bacon Mobile. 3-1 to top 10, and like 6.5-1 to top 5. Should we be considering Gragson a little bit more? I know he's kind of a knucklehead, and I know
and that's where I think the problem is the volatility of his driving style.
Yeah, between the ears is the problem. Like we saw with Bubba, how much of a difference is it when he calmed down just a little bit, how much easier he went. So,
I mean, he did perform extremely well here in a Beard Motorsports car. So, like that goes to show you he can do something at these tracks in a decent car.
For sure. All right. Any other markets you want to look at, or any bets you want to shout out before we make an underdog pick 'em and get out of here?
I want to check. I know Caesars always has like wild race props. I wanted to look at. So we got like fastest qualifier.
Oh yeah, what's Alex Bowman to? Yes, he's 4.5 to 1 to
4.5 to 1. Right? I think it's really interesting though coming into this year. Like I would not be betting that because we don't know what Toyota and Ford have at super speedways with their new body styles. Like one of the things that I noticed when I was at the Clash and I was checking out the bodies, like Ford looks a lot sleeker now. So like it almost looks like they're going to be better in like pushing each other in race trim, whereas we had seen them be really good qualifying, and Toyota, they kind of struggled at the super speedway. I think that was just because of the amount of cars. Whereas Chevy has always been really good at Daytona, and HMS always comes here to qualify well, but they haven't made any adjustments.
So should we consider Ty Gibbs at 25? Bubba Wallace?
That's what I was going to say. Is like, do we think that the Toyotas and the Fords have caught up to Chevy with better aerodynamic car for Daytona specifically too?
Yeah, I don't hate that call.
Yeah, like I think there's a definite chance that we see the end of HMS's reign on the front row here.
Briscoe at 10 to 1, I don't hate.
I think the Gibbs call is great because I mean he's fast.
Yeah, and he's 25 to 1. All right, I'm going to add 2 bets. I'm adding Gibbs on the pole at 25, and I'm adding.
Well, fastest qualifier. I don't even think he has to pull it because I think isn't it being set by the duels?
Oh, yeah, because there's a whole Daytona duels. And maybe that's why our favorite offshore wasn't there.
Oh, of course, yeah, they're always slow.
So fastest qualifier is going to take advantage of actual qualifying for the duels, not winner of the duels who actually starts first, right?
So I think so. Qualifying happens tomorrow, actually, and then they run the duels. And the way they do the duels is they set the rows, or
Okay.
the inside outside.
Okay.
Again, this is the Cali, only 3-4-year-old NASCAR fans talking here.
We're figuring it out. Yeah, I added Gibbs. Bell is interesting. Busher and Keselowski are interesting. Busher at 15.
Man, I almost
Cindric
talked
at
myself
30.
into Gregson. What is his outright bet? Let's see that.
Gragson?
Yeah, let me go back to that.
He is.
He gets 60 to 1. F it. I'm adding it. Why not? We're here to have fun, people.
Yeah. So we're keeping ourselves wrangled in. So as we sit here right now, Alex Bowman to win 30 to 1. AJ Allmendinger top 3, 20 to 1. Chase Briscoe top 5, 575. And Ty Gibbs to put it on the pole at 25 to 1. Brian has Riley Herbst to top 10 at plus 325. He has Ty Gibbs at 30 to 1. He has Gragson at 60 to 1. And then he has Justin Haley over Harrison Burton. I'm tempted to go on the other side of that, but I feel like I'm going to have some exposure to both those guys in DraftKings, so I don't know if I want to go there.
Yeah.
All right, Brian, before we get out of here, I'm going to bring up Underdog Fantasy where you can make pickems. You have to pick at least 2 of the drivers, but you can do basically over or under finishing positions. Kyle Busch is no longer available for some reason, so that's Keselowski. Let's see.
It's probably because of the line. They're adjusting the lines.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's see if we can build something based on the drivers that we both like and or dislike. Because obviously, going with betters is fun, but this is a great place to go with worse and hope they don't.
Hope they're one of the first few people wrecked out.
Chris Buescher is at 7. Ryan Blaney is at 6.5. Denny Hamlin is at 7. Ross Chastain is at 10. Chris Bell is at 9.5. Chase Elliott's at 7.5. Logano's at 7. William Byron is at 7.5. Kyle Larson's 8.5, and Keselowski is 7. Is there a name or 2 that are jumping out to you in that range from the ones that we currently have?
Well, so I do think Christopher Bell at 9.5. I would bet better on that. I'm extremely high on Christopher Bell. He's shown well here. I mean, obviously, finishing results mean absolutely nothing.
Yeah,
at Daytona, in my opinion.
And I like Kyle Larson worse. I think he's probably closer to like finishing outside the top 10 than he is finishing inside the top 10.
Let me just say, I hope he absolutely sucks in the duels and he wrecks out, and then we get like a 25 to 1 because he has to go to a backup car, and then I'm betting that.
That's the only way I see the number moving dramatically is if
he'd have to go to a backup car.
Okay, so those are the 2 I love. If you had to add one more, I mean, we could add both the RFK boys and hope they are near the front, but that seems like a risk.
Yeah.
Do you feel strongly about anyone else? Do we like worse on Chastain just knowing that he can
wreck out at any moment? Yeah. Are those all the drivers?
That's all they have right now. Let me refresh it one more time to see if more drivers come up.
Yeah,
that's all they have right now.
I mean, the thing, like you said, like I love Keselowski and Buescher, But the Daytona 500 is super speedways are unpredictable, but the 500 is a completely different animal than the rest of the super speedway tracks because guys push so hard to win this particular race that I do think that it opens up the possibility for more wrecks coming to the finish.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see a world where Keselowski or Buescher, I mean, if you want to play it safe, are not near the inside the top 10 competing for a victory coming to the end.
Yeah. We could do this.
Like they're going to put themselves in position to win. That's just my thinking.
And then we need to add one more, because if you add one more, then it's 20-1 instead of 10-1. So it's like it's either a 3 or a 5. So I don't mind doing like Bell, Larson, and someone else as a 3, and then adding Keselowski and Buescher for a 5. But I think we should go lower on somebody or worse on somebody.
So I'm really,
although Denny at 7 feels a lot better than Buescher and Keselowski. But I don't know that I want to pick 3 drivers to finish inside the top 7. Maybe I should just do that. How do we feel about that?
I don't hate that, especially Denny's the 500 king.
And he's so safe. And he's like obviously the massive favorite for a reason.
I mean, okay, so one other one that I do think is really intriguing. Christopher Bell has never finished. I mean, William Byron has never finished a 500 better than 21st.
Yeah, he was somebody that was jumping out to me when I was like, I love William Byron. I think he can win the championship again. But this does, outside
This
of
is not his.
Yeah, I feel like
track.
he could be 8th pretty easily.
Well, he only has 3 finishes of 8th or better at Daytona in what is this, 13 races, 12 races.
Okay. All right, yeah. Bell better than 9.5, and then Larson and Byron worse, I think is a nice little trio.
I don't hate that. I actually like that.
Yeah. Like I like Buescher and Keselowski, but getting 7th on them, 7 or better is hard.
I was gonna say it's difficult to have both of them too, because then you're pegging 3 of the 7 top 7 finishers right there, because you'd have Bell, Buescher, and Keselowski.
Yeah. And I'm curious to see if we'll get like day of the race pickems too, because I know in the past they've kind of been like a pre-race thing and then they go away. So if you want to get in with us, now is the time to do that. Otherwise, we'll kind of keep an eye. And if we can put a pick'em together post qualifying, we'll definitely do that and throw that on the newsletter. So that link will be in the description. I will also share it on Twitter. You can also hit Brian or I up, and we can send it your way as well. So make sure you are doing that. Brian, feels good to be back. It feels good to talk NASCAR again. Feels good to be back in the flow. So as I mentioned, this will be up every Wednesday morning. We'll be up with your DraftKings preview by Sunday morning. And then look for the newsletter for the final betting card and all of our thoughts there. For Brian Twining, I'm Kyle Robert. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll talk to you next time.